The coolest thing to me about animation is you start literally with a blank canvas.
I am continually encouraged and hopeful because in the scriptures, the disciples are just morons.
Success in the past in projects has been how much money is it going to make? Success now is how many hearts is it going to change?
This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hi, and welcome to Pod Strangely Warmed. I'm Daniel Hawkins, your host, and today we are getting ready for an amazing conversation about the power of work and faith and how they can intersect together to cultivate vocation in an industry you wouldn't expect out on Methodist Nerd Podcast. Today I am joined by Greg Lyons. Greg is a member at First Richardson and a producer in the film industry, and he's our guest today on Pod Strangely Warmed. Greg, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We are glad to spend this time together to get to know you, to get to know a project that you're nearing completion on, and also hear a little bit about how faith and work come together, kind of the exploration of vocation across a platform. We talk to a lot of people in kind of active churchy ministry on a regular basis, but what does that look like in the film industry? What does that look like in the world around you? Greg, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
As we get started today, we begin with a segment that we call lovingly Self on a Shelf. But part of what we learned today is that the shelf is too small for what was brought. So we've got shelf on the table. I don't know how we want to go here, but
shelf adjacent.
Shelf adjacent. Greg, if you would help us get to know you and your work a little better by sharing with us what you brought.
Yeah. Like you said, I've been working in the film business for all of my career, and recently I've had the opportunity to go to work for a ministry called Salvation Poem Project, and it's a nonprofit ministry that the mission statement is to share the gospel with song and story. So that can mean a lot of different things, but ultimately we're a creative collective of people who are just passionate about spreading the gospel with a lot of different types of projects. We have this project called Light of the World, which is a theatrically released film that actually comes out in theaters September 5th. So next Friday, I'm not sure when this podcast will go live, but September 5th is the theatrical launch. It's going to be in about 2,000 theaters across the U.S.
Cool.
We've got about 35 international territories that are going to be doing theatrical releases of the film. And the coolest thing is any of the proceeds from the theatrical launch will go to translating the film into as many languages as possible.
Oh, very cool.
And then we have a whole ministry partnerships team that will give it away to people in Africa, in Asia, in all these different places where they can use it as a ministry tool.
Very
so
cool.
It's a 90-minute 2D animated film based on the Gospel of John. This is a frame of a original motion test that was done very early on in the process.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So the coolest thing to me about animation is you start literally with a blank canvas, and then you've got to design the backgrounds, you've got to design the characters, and you have to do all these steps to figure out what is this world going to look like.
Yeah.
We really wanted the film to be 2D because of the timeless nature of the art form, and because it's done by an artist's hand.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world with AI and all this computer stuff, there's just a real beauty to someone with a pencil. Now it's a digital pencil now, but with a pencil drawing and creating. Yeah. And this is actually back in the olden days of animation, they would paint cells. An artist will go in and draw a line, animate it, and then another person will go back in and do the ink and paint, and then another person will come in and put it over the background and do the compositing to get the final scene that the viewer sees. And there are 24 frames for every second that a viewer sees. So it's 24 individual drawings that an artist has to do to get 1 second of actual footage from a film. Most films are around 90 minutes, so you can do the math. That's a lot of drawing and a lot of pencil mileage that has to happen in order to make a movie. So it's an amazingly collaborative process. I think on Light of the World, we had almost 1,000 people touch it in some sort of form or fashion. So it takes a huge amount of people. And we just had the best team working together to put together this film, and we're just really proud of it.
Very good. You've got me curious about this process, right? That's over 10,000 frames, right?
It's close. Yeah. I mean, and you're not just doing it once, right? You'll do a passive animation and the director may say, oh yeah, I wish he was looking the other way, or it would be great if he smiled a little bit broader. So then you do it again.
Okay.
So there's a lot of revisions. So by the end of the day, you're, hundreds of thousands of frames are being drawn. You don't always make it to the ink and paint phase. So typically you'll approve the animation first and then it will move downstream to the next department. But lots of man hours and woman hours put together to be able to make any sort of film project, but particularly animation.
Help people have a window into this project and projects like it in particular. Most of us, when we go to the theaters and watch movies, we are invested in the 90 minutes or the 3 hours if it's a Marvel movie.
Right.
That make up that moment, right? What has gone into it? You mentioned thousands or 1,000+ people have touched this project. How long does it take to go from idea to coming up on the theatrical release?
Yeah, it can vary, but this particular project started about 4 years ago. They started writing the script. We had a very generous donor who said, I want to make a movie about the life of Jesus. Here's a pile of money to go do that. So amazing starting point to have the finances for the production budget already there.
At the beginning.
That's not always the way it works. So to be able to start with that solid foundation of finance, then we could start putting together the right team. And for this, because it is a medium that not a lot of people can do anymore, we had to go out and get Disney veterans and, people who worked on Prince of Egypt and, all these films from the 90s that were hand-drawn. Yeah. So recruiting the talent was a big part of it. And then the script iteration started. And how are you going to tell this story that's been told millions of times in a unique way? And that was the real challenge in the beginning, is how do you portray the Gospel of John in a way that people will say, oh, that's cool. I've not looked at it from that angle before. And
preachers know that as the Christmas and Easter challenge.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Everybody comes to church on Christmas and Easter and the story doesn't change.
Yeah.
But how do you communicate that good news in a way that...
And as we've been marketing this film, it's become clear there's so much noise out there. It's really difficult to get people to pay attention to anything. Yeah. So we've been spending a lot of time and effort just telling people about the film, getting the word out there. Our story angle is actually through the eyes of John. And a lot of scholars believe that the disciples were a little bit younger than they're sometimes portrayed in Renaissance paintings. So in our film, John is 15, 16 years old, coming of age. So it's a nice window for kids and families to be able to enter in. And you see at the end of the film, you actually see John ministering to his father, who's not a believer throughout the entire film. He just is doubting. And at the end, he transforms, and he and John say a prayer together to end the film. And it's just a beautiful moment of John's faith and his relationship with Jesus. So it's a really fun but also emotional film. I think that's a lot of times faith-based projects are very serious, and they're just very, we're just going to tell the gospel, and we are very true to the gospel, don't get me wrong, but we also inject moments of humanness and fun. And one of the things that as we were designing the Jesus character was he has to have kind eyes. He has to have a smile that is warm and inviting, because that's what we feel like Jesus should be in everybody's lives. Yeah.
When you work in this role, you are the producer of the film. For those that's unfamiliar with the way films work, what does someone who is the producer do?
That's actually a really good question, because the title is used in a lot of different ways. Sometimes the title executive producer is thrown out, and usually that's either people who have put in money or have name recognition that they attach their name to. So the executive producer is a very high-level person, usually not super involved with the day-to-day production. The type of producer that I am is more involved in how do we get the movie done, from just do we have the right people, how much time is it going to take, more importantly, how much money is it going to cost, are we on budget, are we on schedule, this department is behind, how do we get them to sped up, because it is an assembly line of sorts where if this department falls behind, that means this department is going to get crunched, because ultimately you will have a release date that you have to get something out there. So it's all about keeping it on track, making sure that the team has what they need to be successful. I do work very closely with the director to make sure that their vision is being seen through and showing up on the screen. But at the same time, I have to tell the director sometimes, sorry,
Sometimes you've got to rein them in.
We can't do that right now.
Yeah.
We'll go back to it if we can, but right now we just don't have time. Or presenting an option of you get this or this. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
Because it is a series of choices, and you can't have everything.
Very good. This is an intentionally faith-centered film.
It is,
right?
yeah.
Have you always worked in faith-centered film, or is this?
This is really from a theatrical film standpoint, this is the first faith-based project I've worked on.
Okay.
My background is I went to TCU for college. The day I graduated, me and 5 buddies loaded up the U-Haul.
Okay.
Drove out to LA. Didn't have a place to live.
the
Didn't
U-Haul
have
purple?
jobs.
That's the question.
It wasn't, but it should have been.
Yeah.
It should have been. So we drove out there. Literally no jobs, no place to live. It was really silly and dumb looking back on it now, but it was a great experience and really forced us to just get after it right from the beginning. And we got there and we waited tables and we bartended and we worked on reality TV and all of the stories that you hear about life in LA. But we were all pursuing film production. So we slowly but surely, each one of us kind of got a foothold in certain areas. I always knew that I wanted to be in film. So I got a job on the Sony lot and was fortunate to, it started, I was working on Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, running for them. And then I was able to wiggle my way into Spider-Man 2. Which the physical filming of that was all on a soundstage, these massive green screens.
Okay.
And I was just fascinated with that of, well, how is this all going to come together in the end? And again, was able to work my way into the post-production side of things where that's where I really fell in love with the animation aspect of it all.
Okay.
And the combination of the technology and the art. Because even with 2D animation now, there's a lot of technology involved.
Yeah.
And it just is a fascinating process to me to work with a huge group of people, all with one goal, to create something that at the end of the day gives people a lot of joy. And that to me is why I went into the entertainment industry.
Okay.
This project has turned that on its head just because it does have such a missional purpose to it. I want people to enjoy it when they watch it, but I also want it to spark conversations with families. And I want it to maybe be an entry point for people who don't have faith right now currently. And, I want to learn more about Jesus because I really like what I saw there. And then further down the road, translate it into a native tongue of someone that maybe has never even seen a Bible before. And all of a sudden now they have this tool to be able to learn about who Jesus was and how he impacted the world. And, we deal with everything from the miracles through the crucifixion, but at the end, the resurrection happened. And I just hope people leave with a sense of hope. And, it is a dark world sometimes now, and this film has a chance to be a light in that. And that's a really powerful and daunting responsibility to make sure that it gets out there and does what we think it can do.
Well, I am curious to see. I think that's one of the first that I've encountered of where the perspective of the story is told through the lens of or through the eyes of a young person, right? And so I am really curious to see how that changes, right? So many of the Jesus-centric things are very adult-forward, right? And what might that mean for folks who are in a formative season of life and faith and adolescence to kind of explore? Jesus says, right, if we're going to have faith, we have faith like a child, right? So what does it look like to explore this story through that lens? I'm excited to see that and see how that works together.
Yeah, and I'm going to butcher the statistic, but there's some studies that have been done that most people come to faith before 18. It's some really large percentage.
Yeah.
So children's ministry is so important. Yeah. In church communities, it's so important because you want to infuse the Spirit in them and get them on fire for Jesus. Yeah. I think this has a chance to be that for certain people as well. And like we talked about before, I want families to be driving home from the theater and have a conversation because that doesn't happen enough. Let's really talk about our faith and why do we believe these things and why did Jesus do that? That one of my favorite parts about the story is the disciples are clueless the entire time. They don't get it. They think Jesus is going to come in and conquer the Romans by force. They think he's a typical hero. Yeah. And they just are so confused about all these things throughout the entire story. And then it's not till the very end where they get it. But I think there's a lot of people out there who have doubts and don't understand. And it shows that we're human, and that's okay. And it's okay to question and have conversations.
I am continually encouraged and hopeful because in the scriptures, the disciples are just morons. And so if there's hope for them, there's hope for me.
Right.
Right. And because we all live a version of that, I believe, help my unbelief. Right. We all have that space where there are moments where we are deeply convicted and deeply rooted in our faith. And then others where it's, it's pushed to its point of really, breaking or becoming resilient, right?
Yeah.
And so the more we can kind of encourage a situation and a conversation across multiple generations, the better, right?
Absolutely.
The more we can equip folks. Your family is rooted at First Richardson. They are one of
right.
your partners
that's
in
right.
that helping to raise your kids in the faith, right?
Absolutely.
Talk about the experience of kind of as you've been working through this project the last 3 or 4 years and the way in which your church community has encouraged you or come alongside you and just been a help for you as you both work on this professionally and continue to be dad and husband and, follower of Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know the exact timeline of when we joined First Richardson because it was right when my daughter was born. We had been hopping around to a bunch of different churches, and we need to find a place that has an amazing youth program where we can raise our kids in the faith. And we found FUMCR and have not gone anywhere else ever since. It's been our home, and that was 14 years ago. My daughter is just starting high school. So it's been amazing to watch her grow up through that. Her name is Grace, and my son Noah is in 6th grade, and he also is very involved in the youth program. And we just have loved every minute of our experience there. The staff there is incredible. Clayton, who is the head pastor, has been nothing but supportive of us. His son Grant actually wanted to get into the film business, so we were able to talk about that, and they've been very supportive of this project. We just did a screening in their beautiful worship and arts center yesterday for some children's pastors, and it just is. It's so great to have a community that is so focused on families. And there's a lot of members that are on the older side, but then there's a lot of young families at the church, and they do a really good job of ministering to them and making sure that everybody has what they need to be successful in this really complicated game of parenting, because it is very difficult.
It is. I know every generation of parents thinks it's the most complicated time to raise a kid when they're doing it.
Yeah.
But I think it's the most complicated season to raise a kid.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many external factors that you used to be able to control and shield a little bit, and you still can to some extent, but the social media and all of the things that are just swirling around out there are just really difficult for kids' brains to understand. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, talking and keeping those lines of communication open and praying together and eating together and just being a family. I feel like the busyness of the world has kind of lessened that to some extent. And I think we've seen some impact. There's a huge amount of families that don't behave like families, and there's a lot of unhappy children and parents, and they're just trying to make it through. And I don't feel like that's what life should be. It shouldn't be like, let's just get through this week, or let's just do this. I mean, we've all been given these talents and abilities, and we should use them to the highest level we possibly can. And we should make sure that our kids are pursuing their passions with everything that they have. And human beings are so wildly different. Like, parents really can't dictate where their kids are going to want to go, but we can cheerlead them and help them and support them along the way.
Well, I love, I don't know if you've put this together explicitly or not, but from the beginning, when you were talking about kind of your goal in your work in the early days, right, is to invite people to a moment of joy, right, to even just a moment of escape. And this is a continuation of that theme. Jesus has to have warm and joy-filled expression, right? Like and when we think about the impact on our family, right, life shouldn't just be a slog. There are going to be moments that are a slog, but there should be joy. There should be an expression and of just hope and investment, and that building a community that supports us and cares for us, right? I love the fact that you locked in at FUMCR. It's like we're having our daughter 14 years ago. You've been locked in ever since, right? And they've been partners her whole life long.
Yeah, both of our kids went to the preschool there. Like, it's just been a massive part of our lives throughout their entire growth cycle, and it still is to this day. So, I think that's another important part is you don't want a church community that just focuses on we're just going to serve you until you become a high schooler, and then,
Right.
we don't have that.
Right.
It's a very holistic community. They have great senior activities. They have great young people activities and all in between. So they do a really good job of making sure that no one gets left out of their equation and making sure everybody feels invited. That to us was very important in a church community as well, is we want everybody to come and we want to just be a community and learn from one another. And it's a really great place to be.
Finding that community of folks who will, help raise your kids. Not that they're taking on your kids, but like there are some things that your kid, you were there for Clayton's son when he's wanting to explore what does it mean to potentially go into film. And what do I not know that I don't know, right?
Yeah.
To have folks around us to walk alongside us, because our kids will need more than us.
Yeah.
Right? They will need Christ and they will need community. And the more we can pull that together, the better. You've now said you've lived in some faith-based projects, right? This one being the primary one. You've done work outside of that. When we talk about kind of the intersection of our work and our faith, we also often use the term vocation, right? Where we live out God's purpose in our life through our work.
Yeah.
What has this kind of combination of experiences done for you, and how has it shaped what you hope the next 20 years look like professionally?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying this project had been going on for a little bit before I joined on. I caught wind of it because a friend of mine who had been a producer on Superbook, I don't know if you've ever seen Superbook. It's a CBN produced, more preschool animated show, but it's been running for a long time. And I had talked to him about potentially working together on that a long time ago. We became friends. And he was posting stuff like, I'm making a movie about the life of Jesus. And I became very curious and I started digging in. And it was about that time where just my career as a whole was just feeling a bit empty. I was doing Fortnite cinematics and, working on TV series and really interesting stuff, but it just didn't feel as fulfilling as I wanted it to.
Yeah.
So the idea of going to work for a nonprofit was never really on the forefront of my brain, but it became very appealing to me as I learned more about Salvation Poem Project and what they wanted to do long term, not just with this film, but we're also developing a video game currently that will release at the end of next year. We're developing something called the New Believer course, which is a series of 2 to 3 minute animated videos that help people find how to get plugged in with the local church community and just teach, young believers how to get a deeper grasp on what their faith is all about. So it's not just this film. I mean, obviously this is a very high profile project, but we want to do other projects down the line that have a similar impact and meet people where they are. A lot of young people play video games. So I don't know of a ton of faith-based video games that are out there that kids can jump into and really enjoy playing.
Well, and that last piece is critical, right? Because so often stuff that carries the label faith-based is either not produced super well, not done well, it's cringy.
Yeah.
Right?
And a lot of times that comes down to the budgets just aren't as big and they don't have as much to work with and their intent is great, but it's just...
It doesn't. Yeah.
But in order for it to cut through, it has to be excellent, and it has to be on par with anything, a Marvel film or a Disney film or anything you would see out there. It has to be produced with utmost excellence, and that is another thing that turned me on to the organization. Is we're going to do it the best we possibly can do it, and it's going to be great. And to me, that's always been something that I put into my work: is why are we going to do this if it's not going to be amazing? What's the point? Yeah. So this is a project where the art is beautiful, the animation is beautiful, the story is engaging, and when I read the script and watched the first pass of the animatic, I said, I got to be a part of that. And luckily they were looking for someone with my experience, and you know, it was a total God timing thing. It worked out. But you know, it's one of those things where I wasn't necessarily looking for them. I know they weren't necessarily looking for me, but it worked out to where we came together right at the right moment. And we were able to get the film to the finish line, which is it's a miracle in itself that we were able to get this film here, knowing all of the trials and tribulations to get to this point.
Very good. Theatrical release on the 5th. You've done a number of screenings, the one at First Richardson and a number of other church community. And you mentioned that some of those come with a Q&A afterwards. What has been the most interesting question you've gotten at a Q&A so far?
Oh, that's a good one. You know, a lot of them are questions about how the movie gets made, because a lot of people don't understand the inner workings of how you make an animated film. You know, we get some questions about why is John so young, and why is their skin color the way it is? And, you know, a lot of questions like that. You know, on social media now we're getting a lot of comments of people who are just asking, why did you do it this way? And there's no way you can possibly answer every question. But what we take heart in is knowing that we stayed faithful to the gospel and we are telling the story the way that we feel like is the truest way for it to be told. And at the end of the day, if people say that's not the way Jesus' hair was styled, you know, what are we going to do about that? You know, we came at it from a place of pure heart and good intention. And, you know, I think that's all you can do. There's a lot of faith-based content that's being produced now, which is great. And that's a wonderful thing. And you've seen shows like The Chosen and things like that have these massive audiences. And I really feel like there's a bit of a resurgence in people's desire to see faith-based content. And now that they can watch it at a production value that is on par with the other things they're watching, it really is translated into this renaissance of faith-based production.
I had wondered if you were getting questions about some of those creative choices that you have to make, right? I love our scriptures. My life is committed to them. I live in it. But every act of reading is an act of interpretation, right? There's a lot of gaps that our imaginations are invited to fill in, right? Within the, you know, we're setting the scene in our mind every time we open the Bible, right? I hadn't thought about Jesus' hairstyle, but what is, you know, what does that look like? And in the conversations in our local church, right, The Chosen has given us kind of a gift where people will come in and said, I watched this episode and this happened, and then I opened my Bible and I couldn't find that in it. It's like, there's things that are left unsaid, right, or left
But there's a whole community of people out there who watch The Chosen just to say that's not in Scripture. That's not in Scripture, and it's like that's great. Like they are embellishing, but it's causing people to open their Bible. And to me, there's amazing value in that when you're getting people drawn in to learn more. It's not meant to be you watch the show and you're done. It's meant to be watch the show and then get curious and get on fire and start letting Jesus into your heart. And then all of a sudden, that's when the real transformation takes place.
It's an understanding of the goal, right? Like the critique is coming from a misunderstanding of what is the intent here. Right?
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see how it comes together. I hope that all goes well over the next couple of weeks. You're what, 8 days?
8 days, I think 7 now technically, and we have a holiday in there. So you know, just to give you a window into how theatrical distribution works, opening weekend is massively important because that is the litmus test for demand. If a bunch of people show up on opening weekend, they're going to say, wow, people want to see this movie. And then it will continue on, potentially even open up more theaters. You know, the expansion can happen very quickly if it's a perceived hit for AMC and Cinemark and Regal and all these theater chains. We're at a bit of a disadvantage because we don't have a Warner Brothers or a Sony or one of these big studio behemoths behind us. We're doing this more independently and grassroots. So even more important for people to go out and see the film and support it. And remember, it is a ministry endeavor. It is not something that we're going to take the money from making this and put it in our pockets. This is all being reinvested into other ministry opportunities. I mentioned this a little bit before, but we've got amazing ministry partnerships with people like One Hope and CEF and these people who have these networks in Africa that we could never replicate because they've been building them for 50, 60 years.
Right.
So it's just an amazing opportunity to put this project in their hands in a translated dubbed language. So we're actually casting actors in other languages, re-recording them, and say, here's the movie, and let them go use it for hopefully many years to come. So I think there's going to be a life cycle well beyond the theatrical release.
Very good. Very good. We are a podcast that primarily hits Methodist nerds, right? We are the podcast of the annual conference. Our name is a John Wesley pun, right? So we primarily hit the nerds. And when we hit the nerds, that means some of our nerds are kind of in every generation. If you were talking to a young Methodist creative who was, sitting in the high school ministry with your daughter, or looking at potentially thinking, man, I want to invest my professional life in a creative art, whether it's in filmmaking or something else, what would you say to them as they kind of consider, like, how do I even begin here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first of all, when anyone talks to me about joining the entertainment industry in any capacity, my first question is, do you really want it? Because it is hard, and a lot of people want to do it. So it's very competitive, particularly when you're just starting out. I mean, the amount of applications that we see from just people who are graduating school, just looking for an entry-level job, it's a mountain. So how do you stick out amongst the crowd? That's the big thing. And what I always say is, if you're really passionate about it, you do it in your free time. So great, you went to high school and you like to do art in art class. Well, let me see your portfolio of the stuff that you've done outside of art class. Because that shows me that you love it and you have to do it. It's part of you.
Yeah.
And I think to be successful in any creative endeavor, you have to be so passionate that you can't not do it. So I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of people think they want to do it and then they flame out really quickly because they just don't want it bad enough. And I don't want to scare people, but it is a very difficult industry, and there's just a lot of paying your dues that has to happen in the beginning in order to get to that next level. So you got to kind of fight through some rough patches in the beginning. And we were fortunate with Light of the World to be able to get financing, but a lot of people, when they go to make their projects, they've got to do it on a shoestring budget or no budget, or fund it themselves and show it to people and say, do you like this? And then sometimes people say, I love it. And sometimes people say, I don't like that at all, because it's a very subjective medium. So you have to be prepared to know that not everybody will resonate with exactly what you're doing. But sometimes you'll create something that captures the imagination of people, and you have a Good Will Hunting on your hands, or something like that. Just out of the blue, you can have these amazing successes that nobody saw coming.
Yeah. It strikes me that faith would be especially important as a young person moving into that kind of space, because you're going to potentially face rejection after rejection after rejection, or challenge after challenge after challenge. And so having that core understanding of identity, who am I, right? And what makes me come alive. So that, if it all fails, I know I tried doing the thing that makes me come alive.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because when I was growing up, I was raised in the Catholic Church. My parents are devout Catholics. They're amazing people. And we went to church every Sunday, and we're going to church. And, we didn't have really a huge option in that endeavor. It was, we're going to church. And, so when I went to college, I kind of had a moment where I just distanced from my faith to a certain extent. I wasn't mad. I wasn't like trying, but I just was like, I'm going to not go to church because I don't have to anymore. And it wasn't until I moved out to the West Coast where I really started to reconnect with it. And it's because of exactly what you're saying. Is it was hard, and I was questioning, and I didn't know where to turn necessarily. And, I'll never forget, I was in Santa Monica running and ran past a church, and don't know why, but I just went inside and I sat down. And that was the first time in a long time where I just talked to Jesus, and I just prayed and, just kind of let myself go a little bit. And it was just this really beautiful moment that I think was the starting point of my real faith journey. I mean, obviously I learned a bunch as a kid and learned about the Bible, but that was the start of my true relationship with Jesus. And it's part of the reason I believe I was taken out to the West Coast was to find that. And, was nice to be able to get back to Texas at some point, just because my family's here and I get to live close to my parents, and my wife and her family are all here. So it's a blessing to be able to live in Texas, still work in the entertainment industry. But faith has been a huge, even now, I'm praying all the time that this project is successful. And it's different because in the past,
not since you can have a bigger house in Richardson.
Right. Success in the past in projects has been how much money is it going to make? Success now is how many hearts is it going to change or impact? And that is a very different perspective to come at it from, but it's really refreshing to be able to rest on that at the end of the day. Is if it makes an impact in people's lives, we've had great success.
Amen.
Yeah.
Greg, I can think of no better point to end on than that one. If it makes an impact on people's lives, we've had great success.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
it's
your
been
time
a pleasure.
today.
Really good
Appreciate
chatting with you.
And thank you for being with us today on Pod Strangely Warmed.
Yep, September 5th. Go see it.
There you go. There you go. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more.
Methodist Nerd Podcast.
Well,
I have to change the name.
We got to have our niche here.
You got to have the lane.
Got to have our lane.